Playgrounds in the 1970s were a whole different world. Loud, lively, and full of rules that might seem shocking today. Safety wasn't a priority and kids were expected to tough it out, whether it involved climbing risky equipment or playing rough games. What felt normal back then would leave today's kids stunned. Stay with us as we explore 25 playground rules from the 70s, and trust me, the last rule will explain to you why the words kids and freedom can never be said in the same sentence. Number 1, dodgeball with no soft balls. If you played dodgeball in the 1970s, you'll remember those heavy rubber playground balls stinging every time they hit. There were no foam or cushion versions, just the solid red kickballs that left marks on arms and legs. Teachers and parents didn't see it as dangerous. They thought it built toughness. Eventually, injuries and lawsuits in the 1980s pushed schools to switch to softer, foam-based balls, and companies stopped producing the old hard ones for safety reasons. Even so, those bruises became a badge of honor for many kids. And if flying rubber balls caused enough trouble, the next surprise made things riskier in another way. Number 2, no helmets required for riding bikes during recess. In the 1970s, kids often zipped around the schoolyard on bikes without a single helmet in sight. Scraped knees, split lips, and even head bumps were shrugged off as part of growing up. Helmets weren't widely promoted until the mid-1980s, when medical studies and accident reports revealed the risks. By the early 1990s, manufacturers had focused on safety-certified models. The old idea that a bare head meant freedom quickly faded, and schools stopped allowing helmet-free biking altogether. Still, many recall the wind in their hair and the thrill of that freedom. And if unprotected bike rides felt daring, what came next tested strength in a whole new way. Number 3, wrestling and King of the Hill. Games were tolerated. In the 1970s, it wasn't unusual to see kids grappling on the grass or shoving each other off a dirt mound in King of the Hill. Teachers rarely stepped in unless someone got seriously hurt. The roughhousing was considered normal play, and many schools even allowed it during recess. By the mid-1980s, rising concerns about concussions and broken bones brought stricter supervision, and insurance companies pressured schools to ban such activities. As attitudes shifted, these unstructured battles slowly vanished, and no company or district officially endorsed them anymore. And if those chaotic matches seemed wild, the next game added even more dangers. Number 4, rope swings over concrete. Many schoolyards in the 1970s had rope swings that dangled over hard concrete or packed dirt. Kids launched themselves without thinking twice, often landing with scraped elbows or worse. Safety surfacing like foam pits or rubber mulch wasn't standard until the late 1980s, after injury reports and lawsuits pushed schools to rethink playground design. Manufacturers eventually phased out concrete-based swing setups altogether, replacing them with padded foundations and safer frames. Still, those daring leaps remain vivid memories of a less cautious time. And if falling on hard ground wasn't enough of a hazard, the next game on our list caused pain in a very different way. Number 5, chain swings with no rubber coating. Anyone who used metal swings in the 1970s remembers the sting of cold chains and the painful pinch when skin or hair got caught between the links. Protective rubber sleeves weren't common until playground safety standards tightened in the late 1980s. By then, lawsuits and stricter regulations forced manufacturers to redesign swing sets with coated chains to reduce injuries. The bare metal versions simply stopped being produced, leaving behind memories of yelps, tears, and kids learning the hard way to grip carefully. And if swings could surprise you with sharp little pains, what kids were allowed to bring onto the playground brought even bigger risks. Number 6, clackers, yo-yos, and other danger toys were allowed at recess. In the 1970s, kids brought toys like clackers, yo-yos, and even sharp-edged gadgets to the schoolyard with little restriction. Clackers in particular were notorious for cracking wrists and even shattering into sharp pieces. By the mid-1970s, consumer safety commissions started recalling them after hospital visits piled up, and toy makers quietly phased out the riskiest designs. Safer plastic versions appeared briefly, but never regained the craze. For many, these toys symbolized both fun and danger combined. And if risky gadgets could slip into recess, the next activity involved nature itself being turned into a weapon. Number 7. Snowball fights encouraged, not banned. For kids in snowy states during the 1970s, snowball fights weren't just tolerated. They were often encouraged as a way to burn energy. Teachers watched from the sidelines as kids packed icy handfuls, sometimes with rocks or dirt mixed in, and let the battles rage. By the early 1980s, schools began banning them after eye injuries, and chipped teeth led to insurance claims. Districts issued formal rules against snowball fights, and playground supervisors enforced them strictly. The carefree days of frosty combat slowly disappeared, yet many remember the thrill of those winter skirmishes. And if tossing snow carried risks, the next form of play reached even higher off the ground. Quick question: what playground rules do you remember from your childhood? Drop your memory in the comments. We love sharing your stories in future videos. Number 8. Kids climb trees freely. In the 1970s, it wasn't unusual to see groups of kids scrambling up trees during recess, daring each other to climb higher or hang from branches. Teachers rarely stopped them unless someone fell. The practice was seen as adventurous play, not reckless behavior. By the mid-1980s, liability fears and new playground standards led schools to forbid tree climbing outright, and districts even trimmed or fenced off tempting trees. Manufacturers of playground equipment also promoted safer climbing frames instead. Those carefree climbs became a relic of looser times. And if reaching into the branches felt risky, the next everyday habit carried hidden dangers in plain sight. Number 9. Drinking straight from metal water fountains. Most 1970s schoolyards had metal water fountains, and kids lined up to drink straight from the spout. Sharing germs wasn't a concern, and no one carried personal bottles. The metal often left a strong taste, especially on hot days, and sometimes the water ran lukewarm. By the late 1980s, rising awareness of hygiene and lead concerns led schools to phase out older fountains, replacing them with filtered units or bottled water programs. Companies stopped producing those old heavy fixtures in favor of safer plastic or stainless steel designs. And if sipping from fountains seemed careless, the next play on our list thrived with even less oversight. Number 10. Kick the can and hide and seek in areas with zero supervision. Recess in the 1970s often meant kids scattering into alleys, behind sheds, or far corners of the schoolyard to play kick the can or hide and seek. Supervisors rarely followed, trusting children to return when the bell rang. This freedom sometimes led to accidents or even kids wandering off campus. By the late 1980s, stricter liability rules and growing concerns about safety and abductions pushed schools to confine games to monitored areas. The open, unsupervised recess slowly disappeared. And if disappearing raised alarms, the next routine was brushed off with a simple excuse. Number 11. Slapboxing was shrugged off as boys being boys. In the 1970s, slapboxing, two kids trading open-handed hits until one gave up, was treated as harmless fun. Teachers often looked the other way, saying it toughened kids up. Yet injuries to faces and eyes weren't uncommon. By the mid-1980s, rising awareness of school violence and pressure from parents led administrators to crack down, labeling it fighting rather than play. With schools enforcing stricter discipline codes, slapboxing faded out. Still, many recall the sting and laughter that followed. And if that kind of scuffle was brushed aside, the next problem was dismissed even more easily. Number 12. Bullying was ignored. In the 1970s, bullying on the playground was often overlooked. Kids who were pushed, mocked, or ganged up on were told to toughen up or deal with it. Teachers and staff rarely intervened unless violence got out of hand. By the late 1980s, rising research on childhood trauma and pressure from parent groups changed the conversation, leading to anti-bullying policies and awareness campaigns. Schools adopted zero-tolerance rules, and the old kids will be kids mindset faded away. Still, many remember the sting of being left on their own. And if being picked on went unnoticed, the next activity brought a whole new set of hazards on wheels. Number 13. Kids roller skated at recess with metal skates and no pads. Roller skating at recess was a thrill in the 1970s, even if the skates strapped onto shoes were clunky metal with loose buckles. Kids zipped across the blacktop without helmets, knee pads, or wrist guards, and scraped palms were almost guaranteed. By the early 1980s, rising injuries and better awareness of protective gear pushed schools to restrict skating. while manufacturers shifted to plastic-bodied skates with mandatory pads sold alongside. The old strap-on metal versions faded from production, remembered as both fun and unforgiving. And if rolling across pavement carried risks, the next playground habit made danger part of the game itself. If you're enjoying this trip back to the 1970s, hit that like button. It really helps us bring you more memories like these. And if this is bringing back childhood flashbacks, make sure you're subscribed. We've got plenty more nostalgia coming your way. Number 14, climbing up slides backwards was normal. In the 1970s, sliding down wasn't enough. Kids loved racing each other up the slick metal surface instead. Shoes slipped, heads bumped, and collisions at the top were common, but teachers rarely stopped them. The idea was that kids figured things out themselves. By the mid-1980s, stricter supervision and liability concerns led schools to ban climbing on slides, while equipment manufacturers began adding textured coatings and safety signs. The smooth, tall metal slides of the past slowly disappeared in favor of shorter, safer designs. Yet for many, those risky races were the best part of recess. And if racing on steel caused chaos, the next thing on our list is about settling disputes, and not in a fun way. Number 15, playground fights settle disputes. In the 1970s, playground conflicts often ended with fists instead of mediation. A shove or a swing decided who was right, and once it was over, kids usually shook hands or simply walked away. Teachers and principals often ignored these skirmishes unless blood was drawn. By the late 1980s, with rising awareness of youth violence and pressure from parents, schools introduced conflict resolution programs and stricter disciplinary policies. Physical fights were no longer tolerated, and schools worked to replace them with counseling or detention. Still, many recall those quick battles as harsh but final. And if fists were an odd weapon for children, the selection of toys back in the day was diabolical as well. Number 16, sticks and rocks were toys. In the 1970s, kids didn't need fancy equipment to stay entertained in the playground. A stick became a sword, a wand, or even a baseball bat, while rocks stood in for marbles or makeshift projectiles. Teachers rarely stopped the games unless someone got badly hurt. By the mid-1980s, concerns over eye injuries and lawsuits led schools to ban found object play altogether, while toy companies promoted safer plastic alternatives. For many, though, the creativity made recess unforgettable. And if turning nature into toys caused trouble, the next issue was how schools reacted when accidents did happen in the playground. Number 17, parents weren't notified of minor injuries. In the 1970s, a scraped knee or bloody nose was treated as part of growing up. A teacher handed you a paper towel or sent you to the nurse, but parents rarely received a call. Schools believed minor injuries didn't warrant attention. By the late 1980s, rising legal concerns and changing expectations for parental involvement forced schools to adopt strict reporting rules. Documentation and phone calls became standard, and the casual approach disappeared. Yet many recall walking home with hidden bruises no one ever mentioned. And if small injuries were overlooked, the next issue showed who was left out entirely. Number 18, no accommodations for disabilities on playgrounds. Playgrounds of the 1970s were not built with inclusivity in mind. Kids with mobility challenges often had to sit on the sidelines, watching others climb, swing, and run. Ramps, adaptive swings, and sensory equipment simply didn't exist in most schools. The shift began in the early 1990s after the Americans with Disabilities Act required public spaces to provide access, pushing manufacturers to design inclusive equipment. Older playground structures without adaptations were eventually phased out, leaving behind memories of children left out through no fault of their own. And if exclusion on the playground was troubling, what some kids did on school premises was even more dangerous. Number 19, climbing onto the roof of small sheds or school buildings. In the 1970s, it wasn't uncommon for kids to scramble up drain pipes or jump from playground equipment onto the low roofs of sheds or school annexes. From up high, they'd wave at friends or dare each other to leap back down. Teachers often scolded, but rarely enforced strict bans. By the late 1980s, concerns over falls pushed schools to block access with fences and sturdier roof designs, while liability standards ended production of playground gear that encouraged climbing that high. Still, many remember the thrill of seeing the schoolyard from above. And if rooftops offered risky fun, the next winter pastime turned icy danger into sport. Number 20, winter ice sliding. When the playground froze over in the 1970s, kids turned it into a skating rink without skates. They'd run and slide across icy patches, sometimes colliding into each other or crashing into fences. Supervisors rarely interfered, calling it harmless fun. By the late 1980s, however, schools began salting blacktops and closing off icy areas after serious falls led to broken bones and insurance complaints. Equipment companies also promoted safer winter play options, leaving natural ice sliding behind. Still, many recall the laughter of gliding in sneakers until the bell rang. And if slipping across frozen ground was risky, the next play equipment came from an unlikely source. Number 21, car tires used as play equipment. Old car tires were a staple on many 1970s playgrounds. Kids crawled through them, stacked them, or swung wildly from ropes tied to tree branches. They were cheap, durable, and easy for schools to repurpose. What no one considered then were the risks: steel wires poking out, trapped water-breeding mosquitoes, and even toxic residue from worn rubber. By the late 1980s, concerns over safety and health led schools to phase them out, and playground companies stopped offering tire-based sets. Still, for many, those black rubber circles meant hours of creative fun. And if playgrounds lacked caution with equipment, the same was true for protection against the sun. Number 22, no strictness on using sunscreen. In the 1970s, sunscreen wasn't part of most kids' routines. Recess and field days meant hours under the sun, and a sunburn was brushed off as just part of summer. Few schools encouraged protection, and products were limited mostly to tanning lotions rather than real UV blockers. By the 1990s, research linking sun exposure to skin cancer drove awareness campaigns, and schools began urging hats, shade breaks, and sunscreen use. Those carefree, unprotected days left lasting memories and sometimes scars. And if the sun left kids unguarded, the next playground rule favored the strongest above everyone else. Number 23, the strongest kids dominated games. On 1970s playgrounds, games like Red Rover or tackle-style tag often came down to brute strength. The bigger, stronger kids ruled the field, while smaller classmates were pushed aside or knocked down. Teachers rarely stepped in, believing competition built character. By the late 1980s, new philosophies in child development and pressure from parents led schools to soften rules, encourage teamwork, and eventually replace rough group games with safer, inclusive activities. Still, many remember the pride or humiliation that came with these harsh contests. And if strength decided outcomes, the next activities tested pain tolerance in a whole new way. Number 24, bloody knuckles and mercy games were recess staples. Many 1970s playgrounds echoed with kids daring each other to play bloody knuckles or mercy. These games weren't supervised. Children pressed knuckles together until someone flinched or bent their hands back to see who gave up first. Bruises, scrapes, and sore joints were common, yet adults dismissed them as harmless toughness training. By the late 1980s, rising concern about playground violence and mounting parental complaints led schools to ban such challenges. The traditions faded, but the memory of aching hands lingers for many. And if pain contests were tolerated, the broader rule of recess showed just how little oversight there really was. Number 25, kids ruled the playground until the bell. Perhaps the biggest difference of all was freedom. In the 1970s, recess often meant teachers stayed on the sidelines or indoors while kids policed themselves. Disputes, games, and risks were handled without much adult involvement. That independence sometimes built resilience, but it also led to accidents and unchecked bullying. By the early 1990s, safety regulations and changing parenting styles brought constant monitoring, cameras, and structured play. The unstructured chaos of the past slowly disappeared. For many, though, that wild freedom remains the clearest memory of childhood recess. From risky games to almost no supervision, the playgrounds of the 1970s were a world of their own. Let us know in the comments below. It really helps us keep sharing these stories. Also, like this video and subscribe to our channel for more nostalgic looks back at childhood.